Nearly 100 years ago, a photographer posed for their own camera, using their body to shapeshift, slipping between selves, defying definition. This was Claude Cahun, the surrealist who declared, "Neuter is the only gender that always suits me." Today, Shiao Ying Rao meets the viewer with a similar gaze, protesting with a sex doll against the objectification she experiences. How does a queer body, simply existing, provoke, challenge and inspire us? This is Queer Bodies. In the early 20th century, surrealism offered a way to dismantle rigid identities, to distort, transform and rebuild the self. For queer artists, the body became a site of endless reinvention. Photographer, writer and political activist Claude Cahun used her own body to examine gender and identity, creating work that remains revelatory today.
When you see photographs of Claude, there's a blank background which puts them in this sort of liminal space. There's this definite sort of intimacy and playfulness which I really love, and they're sort of playing with this fluidity of form and this in-betweenness of gender. And they said under this mask is another mask, and they talked about sort of peeling off their identity to reveal something else, and this constant finding and struggling with an idea of an identity, that nothing was fixed and everything was constantly changing. And I think the way that we think about gender fluidity today really resonates with that.
Anton Prinner embodied this spirit boldly through his life and art in the 1920s, living as a trans man and reshaping both his body and creative identity on his own terms.
Prinner's Egyptian Book of the Dead, it takes a lot of cues from the art of ancient Egypt. It takes these really unconventional figures that blur the line between male and female, and it places them into a context of a mutually understood historical past. What that does is it places gender nonconforming figures within a context of a long human history, which is something that is really often denied us. We're not really allowed to have history in the same way that we're not really allowed to have ownership over our bodies. It's a way of delegitimizing trans identity.
Queer artist Frida Kahlo's work transcended the boundaries of pain and identity, using her own body as a canvas for both personal and political expression.
Disability played a really large part of Kahlo's life. You get this sense that there is a sort of internal and external world when you are disabled or you have a chronic condition. There's the identity that you put forward when you go out, and then there's the one that you have when you're inside with people who know about your condition or your disability. Broken Column is very famous, where she's staring at the viewer and really locking eyes with the viewer. And even though she's crying and there's tears coming down her face, it's a very strong and confronting stare. And it's this sort of idea that it's like, this is me and this is what you get. And I'm not ashamed of it, even though there's times in which it causes me pain. She often presents her body as a site of pain and pleasure. And she explores that in quite a lot of detail in her self-portraiture. So it's this sort of duality of self, which I think might resonate with queer audiences.
The way that she uses her body and her form in self-portraits is very vulnerable. And it's saying something about the female form in a way that you can tell that this was painted by a woman. Like sometimes when you see a painting in a gallery of a nude woman, you know that that's a man who painted that. You can see the male gaze. So when you see a woman painting another woman, or painting herself with another woman, you have a completely different conversation happening there. And I think that's one of the reasons why Frida Kahlo's work is so celebrated. It shouldn't be quite so unique, but there aren't as many women in galleries on display doing that as there should be.
There's something very powerful about being represented through art, about seeing yourself reflected in the wider world. It's about saying, I exist. For queer people, that's radical. And today, queer artists like Zanele Muholi continue this tradition using photography to shape new narratives of the body.
There's been a few retrospectives of Muholi's work now, and I think every time I see them, I just find them absolutely awe-inspiring. I think the work, Faces and Phases, which started in 2006 and has about 600 different individuals photographed, is an incredibly impressive work. I think for me, this display is incredible because you're getting a view into multiple lives, and you're seeing so many facets to what it means to be transgender, non-binary, queer, black, and proud. To walk up to that and sort of think of it as a multifaceted mirror, I think is really fascinating in terms of thinking about how you interact with these people in that space. And I think that's what is incredibly important about thinking about the work of Muholi. You are invited to position yourself in this work as well and think about where you stand on things. I think when Muholi calls himself a visual activist, for me, what I get from that is they're providing proof, visual proof of existence. And I think that in queer life, sheer existence can be political. And the fact that we're here and documenting ourselves is a really important part of this as well. It's not for others to collect our stories for us. It's for us to document it ourselves. And I think this is exactly what Muholi's doing.
In Catherine Opie's photography, the body can also be seen as a site of identity, community, and queerness.
Opie's work, something that I find remarkable about them is it creates a sense of empathy within the viewer. In some instances, you kind of look at the work and you're drawn in a way that invites you to try to understand what that person's going through. I think when you are queer, you have a few markers in your journey, and one of them is coming to understand your own queer identity. There is also a sense that we are constantly reshaping and reforming who we are and who we want to be as well. And across the works, you get a sense of that.
Artists like Shiao Ying Rao use photography as a tool to reclaim their body and agency over their own image.
I like to intentionally challenge societal norms around bodies, gender and sexuality in my work by using the classic tactic of taking an image that is very recognisable, mainly just representations of like feminised bodies and feminine bodies, usually in very sexual and male-gazy poses or backdrops, and then reworking that so that the visual language is still there, it's still very recognisable, but it's no longer what you expect it to be, and it takes on a different meaning. And I think that's a way to sort of regain agency over a lot of long-standing traditional tropes. When I use my own body in my work, it does throw up other complexities, and a white person is quite standardized here, but whenever I use my own body or my own face in my work, it has like a whole other element to it because of my face, which is why sometimes I like to put a mask on, because it takes away that element of interpretation, which I suppose is probably why I do return to the themes of like racial fetishization quite a lot, because it's not really something that I can escape from.
Queer people, even those of us who aren't disabled or don't struggle with constant pain, our bodies become a bit of a battleground. A lot of LGBTQ plus discrimination and association and pain is rooted in our body being wrong, it not looking the way it should, in us using it in a way that we shouldn't. So I think a lot of queer artists, even contemporary queer artists, use the body as a way to explore queerness.
Art is really meant to be publicly consumed, like that's what it's for. It's meant to confront and incite and inspire people. And for queer art and trans art to bring this struggle to the foreground is really universalizing, or just making it clear that this is a universal struggle. What queer art and trans art is able to do, among other things, is to really confront people with this fight that I think a lot of people are really reluctant to engage in. And it's a universal battle for self-determination and bodily autonomy.
Digital art and social media have made queer body representation more accessible in many parts of the world. Yet it remains deeply political, often censored or erased. One way this manifests is through the lens of otherness, a theme deeply rooted in Gothic literature and modern horror films where queerness is often villainised. In our next episode, The Queerness of Horror, we'll explore how queerness has historically been portrayed as a symbol of fear and darkness, and how queer artists have reclaimed it as a source of power and defiance.